Hello and welcome to Move the Line, presented by DraftKings Sportsbook. I'm Ryan Noonan, back to talk week 2 sides and totals, joined here, as always, by Connor Allen. Connor, what's going on, buddy? Great week 1.
Yeah, I mean, had one of my best week 1s ever. Went 11-3 on props that we released, and we lost Gardner Minshew under pass attempts by the last pass attempt, and we lost Ezekiel Elliott by half a yard. So, I mean, to be fair, though, I can't complain. We had David Montgomery over 52 rushing yards and over 87, and he hit both of those in overtime. So definitely ran pure on some stuff, got hooked on some others. It all balances out. Either way, it felt good. We were reading the room right, and it was an awesome week 1.
Excited to be back for week 2. Really excited about our guest today. Gentleman that I massively respect as I think one of the best, if not the best, newsletters out there in the space. I don't subscribe to a lot of them, but I found this one to be tremendously actionable. You can find him on Twitter at the Power Rank. You can go to thepowerrank.com, and his recently released 60-minute guide to the 2024 football season is a must listen to on Spotify. Is our friend Ed Feng. Ed, welcome to the show. So happy to have you on for the first time. Been on your show, but to have you here for Move the Line feels like long overdue.
Ryan, Connor, thanks to you so much for having me on. I'm really looking forward to talking about the NFL. So much to talk about. And I appreciate all the kind words about the letter and the audio, the newsletter and the audiobook.
Yeah, tell people about the audiobook before we jump in, what they can expect there and where they can check it out.
I really wanted to do something a little bit different with the NFL preview. There's so much good stuff out there in terms of like kind of team by team content. But I wanted to do something with audio, and I wanted to kind of give a little bit more of a deep dive into some of the process behind what I use at the Power Rank to get some insights into football. And so it's split up into 2 sections. The first is about how to predict interceptions. I kind of use Josh Allen as a jumping off point. And man, if you do not know like the story about how Josh Allen got ignored by the entire college football complex, it is completely wild. You would think a guy that stands 6'5" with a rocket arm these college programs would just be jumping at him, but that's really not. That wasn't the case at all for Josh Allen, and it's kind of crazy. And then the second story is about how to use the wisdom of crowds to actually make NFL spread predictions. And it's something that seems so stupid on the face of it to like go look at these subjective power rankings the week before the start of the NFL season. But I hope to convince you that, the results are worth it. And it's a really important part of my handicapping process. Definitely the first 6 weeks of the season, definitely the playoffs, which I talk about in the audiobook. But yeah, I mean, definitely for week 2. And I hope we'll get into that game a little bit today. So yeah, so you can check it out on my site. You can actually listen to it for free on Spotify if you have certain types of plans. Check that out at thepowerrank.us. That'll take you to a place on my site. You know a little bit more about the audiobook and where you can get it. It's available on a lot of platforms, but Spotify. I mean, I just use Spotify. I like the platform, and they awesome. That's actually really good to hear because there's some other people. I'm like, hey guys, check this out. I'm like, oh, I don't use Spotify, and I'm like, yeah, you really should. It's really like a convenient, good, place. I mean, that's where I get all my podcasts and stuff too. But yeah, so thepowerrank.us. And, if you have certain types of Spotify plans, you can just listen to it for no additional charge.
Yeah, I'm not, Connor will get mad at me sometimes because I'm that dude in the group chat that has my texts appear in a different way. I don't have an Apple phone, so I'm not an Apple. Yeah, I'm a green text guy. I'm sorry. Android phones, still an Android dude. But yeah, I mean, I like Spotify, so I don't have like Apple Podcasts or, the other things like that. So I used to be a Stitcher guy back in the day that no longer exists, and Spotify is so much better than whatever that was. Rest in peace to Stitcher. But yeah, Spotify kicks ass. So does Ed's audiobook. Honestly, I listened to it. It's nice enough to share it with us a couple of weeks back, and it's easy to digest, and I think will help. Even though we're only in week 2, you're thinking about it as like a preseason listen. Still very viable. And again, part of why, I'm drawn to Ed and his content. We kind of live in the fringes. I like my tackles. Ed's in the interception space. My brother in the prop street. So massive respect for that. So grinding the niche markets out there as much as possible. All right. I want to remind folks that 2 episodes of Move the Line each week. This is the game preview. Going to go around, share some storylines, some things that we have, some overreactions. Obviously, week 2 is ripe for that. subscribe to wherever you listen. If you're watching on YouTube, we appreciate that too. 4for4 Bets YouTube channel. You can find Move the Line on Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. Definitely appreciate that. If you want to get all the official plays that we have and all the things that we do this season over at 4for4, you want to get the betting subscription. Gets you full access to the entirety of the sites, articles, tools, rankings, projections, anything you could possibly do in the football speculation space is going to be included in the betting sub. Lots of different ways to get it. Head over to 4for4.com/plans to check it out. You can head over to our Twitter page as well. Lots of different promos being tweeted out and discounts and all those different things. Or you can just DM us directly. We'll definitely find a way for you, depending on your state and what you can do to get you in for as cheap as possible. Come back on Friday again, 3 p.m. Eastern, prop drop, me, Connor, John Hyslop. We got real close on some uncorrelated parlays last week. Overall, a really good show. Excited to run back prop drop with Hyslop all season long. So, all right, gentlemen, week 2, Ed kind of touched on it. I think it's kind of one of, if not the most challenging weeks to handicap, definitely in the team picture. We are like massively anticipating meaningful football games for about 8 months. We spent all this time doing 60-minute podcasts around what to expect for the season. Connor and I did, 8 divisional previews. We give, each team's got about 20 minutes. And then we see 60 minutes of football from each team, and we have no idea how to put it into proper context. So what's actionable, what's noise, what's matchup, derived, we have no idea. So let's talk about a little bit of like overreactions. What teams should we be worried about? What were some bad performances that we're like not really concerned about? However you want to take this, Ed, what do we do from week 1? What's a big takeaway for you?
Yeah, I mean, we can go with so many places with this, right? I mean, one thing that kind of jumps off to me, like we know the Cincinnati Bengals had a bad day, right? I think this is where you really kind of take your prior into consideration, like with a healthy Joe Burrow and a lot of players that they have, are they really going to score 10 points if they play New England again? I think not, right? And, we expect a guy like Joe Burrow to play at a high level, right? We know this guy's good. He has the track record. And then, so that prior is a lot different than a prior like on a Deshaun Watson, right? A player that's had a much different trajectory and who at one point I would have made the argument, I would have probably argued, at least in my own mind, like I want this guy maybe instead of Patrick Mahomes. That was a long time ago. And he's obviously gone through a lot, and he really hasn't shown it on the football field since he's been in Cleveland. So when you look at that performance, maybe you put a little bit more credence in it as well, right? And then the third one I really want to point out that I thought was really interesting was Green Bay and Aaron Rodgers. So this was someone that I was not high on coming into the season. They go into San Francisco, and all my bets win on that game. I really like San Francisco, so that was fantastic. But then you open up the numbers, and it wasn't all that bad for the Jets. I think they couldn't run the ball. They had very few pass attempts, but their passing successor was actually pretty decent. And there's kind of like this, my numbers actually moved them up compared to San Francisco, which is not correct. We've talked about that a little bit. I mean, this is why I stick back to my priors, especially week 1. But the other thing I thought about that is like, I don't think Rodgers was great, but I think we saw a little bit of the old Aaron Rodgers. That pass that he looped into up the sideline. I think it was to
Lazard. Yeah, it was Lazard.
To Lazard, right? I was like, there's not too many bad quarterbacks can't make that throw. And then the offsides one that he got to Lazard, up the middle was pretty impressive. So you saw glimpses of the old Aaron Rodgers, which is really not what I was expecting. You saw that kind of like the quick throw, the quick release, and getting accurate balls into places. So I'm holding off a little bit there. Maybe I was a little bit wrong on Jets under 9.5 wins. Remains to be seen, but looking forward to seeing what happens in the future there.
Yeah, we know the schedule opens up, Connor, and the Jets. That was part of our handicap, was that just no matter what you thought of the Jets, if Rodgers had any sort of pulse, and again, it kind of been a little bit since we've seen that, maybe not the same distance since we last seen a viable Deshaun Watson per se, but it's been a little bit since we saw Rodgers with a pulse. Any follow-up to Ed's thoughts there in the open, and take it wherever you want it.
Yeah, I mean, to start with the Jets, it seemed like early in the game they were just like committed to the system of the Jets. Basically, it was like early down run, didn't go anywhere. Second down was like either a bad play or another run. And then they would be bailed out on third down. Like their one touchdown drive, it was like basically 3 of them, like 4 of them to Garrett Wilson, like on third down. And then when they went to like the quick passing game when they were trailing, they looked way better. I mean, outside there was a tipped pick, but then they kind of went to like, okay, Rodgers is going to take this where he wants to go with it. And I think when that blend starts clicking a little bit more, maybe in matchups that are a little bit more friendly, not against one of the best defenses in the league, I think the Jets are going to look pretty good. Defensively, definitely a little concerning. They couldn't stop the run for their lives. But again, the 49ers are a great team there. So I think I want to stick to most of my priors in the Jets, which were pretty high. I think a little bit higher than Ed's. So I'm still interested in them. The Bengals are an interesting team because as we got closer to Sunday, it was one of those things where I'm like, well, if the Bengals can't stop the run, because again, they lost DJ Reader, their run defense is bad, and all their receivers are basically out / coming back for the first time in Jamar Chase. And then you have Andre Yoshivas, who's a 100% player who I love, but again, should probably not be a 100% player, on this team, especially in week 1. Like they might struggle a little bit, and the Patriots got their way, ran the ball consistently, converted on some third downs, and played well defensively. So like, I'm not ready to hit the panic button fully on the Bengals because I think that they ran into like one of the worst matchups possible. And we're probably going to get into that game specifically, but I'm not sure it gets all that much better in this spot against the Chiefs either. So those are just my 2 big takeaways here. And then one last one on Deshaun Watson. Like, I mean, Ed touched on it. Like since he joined the Browns, 59% completion rate, 6.2 yards per attempt. He's out of the 71 quarterbacks with 100 plus attempts in the last 2 years or 3 years at this point. He's 52nd in EPA plus CPOE composite score. So like he's just hasn't been good. I mean, he hasn't been good since he was in Houston. And so I think at this point, like us holding on to the glimmers that we saw of him playing like an MVP level in Houston for whatever that 10-game stretch of one season, like I just don't think that exists anymore in the current system. Like they need to move on. Like I think it needs to be just over for Deshaun Watson.
News cycle might be giving them a loophole to do that too. We'll have to wait and see what happens there with the recent allegations and all that stuff. It's a different show. But yeah, that seems to be pretty murky, and who knows what's going on there. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to argue. I mean, if you wanted to make a case for Deshaun Watson at all, it was the fact that maybe there's something maybe we were underrating a little bit of the Cowboys defense coming into the season. Maybe the Zimmer defense is something that we need to have given a little bit more of a bump to. Also, you did have him going up basically without his 2 tackles in Jedrick Wills and Jack Conklin in that matchup against, obviously one of the best, most disruptive edge rushers in the game. But I mean, it was bad last week. Drop back success rate, 23% is the lowest of any week 1 starter. He's pressured 25 times in that game. Looked disinterested too. I mean, body language police, but it didn't look good. Pressured 6 times. 5 for 17 under pressure, 22 yards, took 6 sacks. He's always kind of taken sacks. It's always been a thing. And part of that, you see those guys that have the ability to create outside the pocket, scramble, hold on the ball a little bit too long. When the magic disappears and dries up, now those are just sacks, right? Or picks. And that's bad. We saw both for Deshaun Watson there. It's not going to get better without those, tackles in the spot against Jacksonville, who's going to play a crap ton of man. Has a pair of edge rushers that could be problematic for Watson too. So that injury report is a pretty big one to watch out for in terms of handicapping the Jacksonville-Cleveland game. But I want to talk to you guys about the Falcons. Are we concerned at all about the Falcons? Just straight pistol, Connor, for Kirk Cousins. Didn't look good. You watch a little bit of the all 22 end zone stuff and just looked like he looked like a guy that didn't want to kind of get off that back foot and drive the football down the field. And I think there's a difference between being healthy and good enough to play and then getting in the game and actually having that confidence and getting through. And we saw it a little bit too. And having him out of the pistol was a little bit concerning as well. And the offensive line played absolutely abysmal. They got wrecked. And another spot where I don't know that it gets better in week 2. So
yeah, I think 2 things can be true here. Like he is not ready to play. Ben Solak did a great breakdown of like his under center versus pistol rate historically. And then compared to now, like he's historically been under center, a lot of the move, a lot of like play action, boots. They didn't do any of that. It was just like a lot of pistol. And I think that's just because he can't move. Like he wasn't able to even drive off of his back foot at times in the throws, which I thought was really problematic. So, but on the same time, again, this is the other aspect is like, I think the Steelers defense is pretty good. I think their pass rush is pretty good. And that like some of it is, was matchup fueled. So that's kind of my only like issue with being like, oh, Falcons are done. The offense is over. Like, it's just, I don't want to throw in the towel fully. I think they'll be able to figure some stuff out. Bijan Robinson looked pretty good for the most part. I think if they can get any semblance of a passing game going, I think that they'll be probably fine. But I mean, he needs to get healthy quick. Otherwise, again, if they're not able to do anything that he's good at, like, they probably just need to put in Penix, I guess, and see what goes from there, because it was pretty pathetic at times, honestly, when you have the weapons that you do and not able to complete like 10 to 15-yard passes.
Yeah, Ed, what are your thoughts there? I mean, at Philly this week on Monday Night Football, not Kirk's, strong suit historically. Then they get to Kansas City in week 3. So, like, this is kind of what Connor and I were talking about, like that division as a whole. Maybe you jump in later if you had some sort of future lean, like, because you have that week 4 matchup against the Saints, and probably feel decent about whoever comes out on top of that one, although obviously Tampa Bay still in the mix. But thoughts on the Falcons after week 1?
Well, I'm just my son and I are mad that Drake London had 2 fantasy points. This is the first year we're doing fantasy football, and when you lose your first game ever by 2 points, doesn't feel good to see those types of numbers from Drake London. I mean, I think it's something where, like, you don't want to give a hope on Atlanta simply because, like, yeah, the next 2 weeks are hard, but preseason they had by far the easiest schedule of the NFL in that division. Pretty sure they get the Chiefs at home, right?
Yeah, they do.
So, a little bit of an edge there. And, as far as Cousins goes, I don't know. Like, I didn't actually have a chance to see the game yet. But he's a veteran quarterback, and, is it time to give up on him, especially when, they had all those turnovers? You're gonna lose that type of game. So I don't think it's quite ready to give up on Kirk Cousins yet. Let's see how this plays out, and give it a couple more weeks.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that too. The offensive line was bad. They typically are, I would say, a strength of the team, but they're not usually that bad. So that was definitely a problem. And that's going to happen against a good defense. And Pittsburgh is obviously, especially up front, can definitely generate pressure. And yeah, I mean, just TJ Watt just played his face off in that game. And it was a lot of fun to watch. So, all right, let's jump into some of the week 2 games. We touched a little bit and danced around some of the stuff here as it relates to Cincinnati. It's one of the, I think, better games here on the slate this week. They are like on the road in Kansas City is not a great place to be. This line has been on the move a little bit. Where were we in the opener? We're about, it was 3.5 in the look aheads last week after sitting out at like 4.5 for most of the offseason. We are out. We touched 6 for a little bit. We are back down to 5, 5.5, depending on where you're shopping. Totals out there at 47. It's obviously, been a good matchup for Burrow historically. He's fared pretty well against the Chiefs in his career, Connor, 3-1 record. Obviously some playoff games, some highly contested games. All 4 of those games have been within 3 points, so they've been tightly contested. But obviously some concerns with Burrow. We don't know what's going on with the injury report here. Obviously T. Higgins, his issues too. Obviously having him back make things a little bit difficult, or would make it a little bit easier and less difficult. What are your thoughts on Bengals Chiefs?
Yeah, I have a tough time backing the Bengals here. Maybe it's just recency bias from what we saw, but if we look at this matchup specifically here, like the Chiefs, I mean, we saw this Bengals defense here specifically just struggle against the run, against the Patriots offensive line that we don't think is very good, and an offense that we don't think is very good. Now they get the Chiefs offensive line, which is better. Isaiah Pacheco is better, and you have a capable passing game. Like, I think that the Chiefs, realistically, if they wanted to go pass heavy, I'm sure they'd have some success, but they can go run, deep pass, play action, and just like absolutely shred this secondary if they want to with that kind of game plan. And I mean, I'm fully expecting them to do that because they can just run the ball, give Patrick Mahomes, a day off essentially, and have plenty of success with Pacheco in this running game against just like what looks like a bottom 3 run defense right now in the NFL in the Bengals. And so I worry about that because it puts a lot of pressure on Joe Burrow and this Bengals offense to carry the team against a Chiefs defense that once again looks pretty good. I thought they played pretty well against the Ravens in week 1. And there's not a clear path to success for this Bengals offense that without T. Higgins, who looks like he's going to miss again, didn't practice again today. Now, again, you're having Jamar Chase come back. And now he needs to be that full 100% Jamar Chase, I think, for them to stand a chance. So am I excited to lay the 5.5? No, but I think that that's probably my look on this game at this point. It just seems like it's going to be a lot of pressure on Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase to essentially carry this team to success in this game.
Yeah, Cincinnati just gashed for a year plus now, Ed. Explosives on the ground. For New England to do that last week was the one thing that makes me a little bit nervous. But what are your thoughts here?
Right. I mean, look, there's a huge random element to explosive plays, so I'm not going to make too much of that. This is a game where, like on my site, I do a member prediction, and I'm actually I don't really love my adjustments these first couple weeks. I'll make an adjustment based on closing market spread, passing success rate, yards per pass attempt, and it actually dropped the Bengals like 1.5 points. I think that's just too much for week one. And when you have a preseason model that does pretty good, so if you go to my site, I have Kansas City by about 8, kind of suggests value at 5.5. But again, like, are we overreacting to what we saw last week? I would lean towards yes. And then my preseason model actually has this by 6.7 points. So this is the wisdom of crowds model that I talk about in the 60-minute guide to the 2024 football season. And for this game, I'm going to stick with that. I'm going to stick with what we thought about in the preseason. Partially, that's because like this model's just done pretty well. When it differs from the closing line by 2 or more points, it's about 54% against the spread since 2014. Now, please do not go and just bet the model. And
it's a good sample though. In 10 years,
it's just simply too hard. But like I do use it as a tool, and for this game in particular, like I'm gonna say, like my handicap is like this should be about a touchdown, right? Forget about everything we saw last week. It should be about a touchdown. So, I mean, I would get interested if I could get Kansas City -5. I doubt it's going to get there. I definitely see this moving more towards Kansas City, so I'll lean that way. But I think the handicap there is like, look, like let's assume that Cincinnati can kind of get together. Burrow's going to play better than last week, and let's also assume that Kansas City is really the best team in the NFL, probably, right? With Mahomes and Reed and just a defense that really surged last year, and they still have a lot of those key pieces. I think it's reasonable to say that this should be almost a touchdown, and we'll see where the markets close.
Yeah, 5's out there currently. DraftKings, ESPN, couple other shops right there. 5.5's out there too. So yeah, I'm kind of with you guys. I think that I don't want to overreact to what we saw in Cincinnati because they were a team that I was bullish on coming into the season, like them to win that division. We've seen this historically with them: slower starts, flip the switch. They were doing it last season before Burrow got injured again. Mid-season there in Baltimore and kind of ended the run there. But I still think that they're in the mix, but I think Kansas City is legit, and they'll be able to scheme up stuff here. And at 5, I think on Kansas City is the right side. So, all right, we'll keep it moving here. Touch on the New Orleans Saints making the travels to Dallas here. Let's see where our line has moved here. 6.5 basically painted across the board. Totals a little different. We got 45.5s out there all the way to 46.5. Which I think is interesting. It's not necessarily a key number, but still getting pretty close to that. What's interesting to me is that we had a pretty good showing last week for the Saints, kind of regardless of what you thought of them coming in. And this was 6 in the look aheads, and Dallas looked pretty good too. It's now 6.5. It's basically, I think, the market telling us that they thought that was a little bit of phony business, and maybe the Panthers are not a real NFL football team. Ed, what are your thoughts on Saints and Cowboys?
Right. I mean, I would have made this about 7.5 in the preseason, and my numbers bumped up both of these teams, and so I still have about 7.5. I don't think either team will play as well as they did last week, whether that was fluky performances, bad performances by their opponents, or particularly good performances by them. Dak got that big contract, and I think that they're going to be able to do some things on offense, but still some question marks on the offensive line with the personnel that's changed there. Don't really love their defense, and then for New Orleans, like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't think Carolina is as bad as they showed last week. I think it's more like they're bad, but not that bad. And let's see a little bit more from New Orleans before we really start backing them. This is definitely a stay away from me. It's a stay away from me.
Yeah, let's not crown the Saints yet, Connor. Tough spot too. Offensive line is bad. Panthers are not really designed to exploit that. Dallas might have a little bit more success doing so. And then Marshawn Lattimore looks like he's probably not going, dealing with a hamstring injury. I don't think practice today. It's not been like a bounce back quick from an injury guy in his career. It's not good news for their matchup here against the Cowboys passing offense. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I go back and forth. You guys brought up a lot of it here. I think this is the ultimate like week one reaction game, right? Of like how bad are the Panthers and how bad is the Browns offense based on what we saw. And I don't think we really know the answer to that. So I think we have to rely a lot on our priors here. And so, like you mentioned, you had this at a little over 7 in the preseason. I think I would have had it probably right at a touchdown here. Like I think that makes perfect sense. And some of the match specific stuff you brought up here, Noonan, of the offensive line, like I mean, this was projected to be the worst, if not one of the worst offensive lines heading into the season. And just because they drew, again, this Panthers defense now without Derek Brown projects to be, I mean, the worst bottom 3 defensive line in the league at this point, Noonan.
It's not good. I mean,
yeah.
When you're relying on a lot of Ashawn Robinson snaps to penetrate, like that's like you're in trouble. It's going to be clean pockets for guys all season against the Panthers.
Yeah. So like how much stock do we really put into that? I'm just not really ready to get there as the Saints being a team that should beat anyone by 40. So I tend to think that was just a little bit of variance. So for me, it's probably a lean towards the Cowboys at 6.5. But overall, we came into the season wanting to be a little bit lower in the market on the Cowboys. I'm just not sure if this is that opportunity here to really, buy back on another team.
Yeah, I was just fascinated by it. I mean, I know Dallas had a good game, but I thought if at any point in the season there was going to be positive market sentiment for the Saints, it might be off of like a game where you barely had to play your starters in the fourth quarter and you absolutely boat raced another NFL football team. Because I agree with that. Like, I think the Panthers are pretty bad. I don't think they're that bad. I don't think any team is that bad. But the fact that the market's just like, nah, kind of calling bullshit on the Saints here, and we don't really believe you either. So interested to see what happens there. Next one, I'm going to talk about the Rams and the Cardinals here. This is a game in Arizona, obviously a divisional matchup here. The Cardinals 1.5. There are ones out there as well. And total between 48.5, 49.5. Again, kind of kicking around some key numbers there. This was Rams minus 2.5 in the look aheads. So we've had a little bit of movement. Obviously another team where the injury report is massive. I mean, the fact that the Rams almost stole that game on the road against a team that we think is Super Bowl worthy in Detroit with one NFL starter along the offensive line. And look, and they barely did because like they gave up a ton of pressures, and Stafford is that dude. Again, probably one of the most underrated quarterbacks of this generation, what he's able to do. They lose Cooper Kupp in game, just absolutely abysmal. Now, again, I don't know what they're going to have for an offensive line this week, Ed, but it's again, another spot where against any of the other teams in the league, it might matter. Against the Cardinals, it might not matter that much. They don't really generate pressure very often. Thoughts on the Cardinals 1.5 point favorites at home?
This spread does not make any sense to me at all. No, I mean, you mentioned why Arizona's favored. All the injuries for the Rams. Puka Nacua is out. That obviously matters. The injuries on the defensive line. The Rams not having Darius Williams, who has been a great cornerback in the past. So that's why. That's part of the reason why Arizona is favored. You look at Arizona last week. They were up big on Buffalo in the first half. Buffalo did end up coming back in that game and winning. I really liked Buffalo in that game and sent it out to my members. Unfortunately, by the time I had capped it and by the time I sent it out, it had moved from 5.5 to 6.5, which is not good when the game lands on 6. So a little bit of bad luck there.
That's tough.
But are we really bumping up Arizona for that game, right? Like it pretty much landed where we expected. Arizona had a kick return for a touchdown, which is a type of play that has a big random element to it, right? So like not a reproducible type of thing. Buffalo is definitely the better team. And like, I don't like this Arizona roster at all. I need to see Kyler Murray be back to the guy he was in 2021, where he led them to the playoffs. And instead, I see stats that are getting worse with every year. And obviously, there's injuries that are going on, and he was working his way back from injuries. But I'm really not convinced at all. I think this is a bad roster. I think the Rams. Look, I mean, I think the injuries do matter, right? And that, but like, are we like? I have this by 4. right? That's the number I'm going to go with. This is pretty much my preseason prior. And Rams by 4 on the road. I think that makes sense with a team, Rams that should probably be a little bit above average, especially if everyone's healthy. Let's downgrade them a little bit because of the injury situation. I can't get to Arizona being favored. So
the injury situation was the same. I don't know that it's probably only better than it was last week, right? And they took the Lions. And again, I know we're
exactly. And I think that's a good point to bring up, right? Like, I don't really think we can expect them to play as well as they did with that offensive line.
For sure.
Again, against a Detroit, they were really good in that second half against the Detroit Lions defense that I think is a lot better in the secondary this year. I just think there's simply more talent there, and they're going to be pretty good. I don't expect that, but I don't think you need that against an Arizona defense that was one of the worst in the NFL last year. And yeah, did they bring in some veterans to help it? Yeah. Did they get some high draft picks to kind of help that defense? Yes. But like, it's a really bad defense. I think the Rams can do what they want here.
Well, their first round pick, Darius Robinson, is going to play as many snaps as us this weekend. He's on IR. So that any attempt to get a splash along the line from a pass rush standpoint is just not happening. So yeah, I was with you, Connor. This is kind of where we were in the preseason. This roster is just not good. And I know there was some encouraging people like the Cardinals. They were like a buzzy team. And I think it made sense if you are basically thinking that you're going to get like a top 10 percentile outcome from Kyler Murray. But even then, they just, to me, become a shootout team and not actually a playoff contender, right? They don't actually start to make a dent in that division or in the NFC. So I'm with Ed here. I think his line at 4 is strong, but I think that's actually encouraging because I think the Rams are a great look here.
The Cardinals D line versus the Rams O line is like the movable object versus stoppable force. It's like the opposite of the saying, because the Rams edge rushers last week got a 3.5% pressure rate. Brett Coleman tweeted that out. It's like one of the worst that he's ever seen. Basically, the Cardinals defense last week against the Bills allowed a 68.8% drop back success rate. Only them and the Commanders were over 60% last week. Just like horrible, like unimaginably bad metrics coming out of week 1. And like, look, I think the Bills are good, but I don't think the Bills even played one of their best games. Like, they played very much fine offensively and they played okay, but like, I think the Cardinals defense is just that bad. And so the Rams offense here, what's interesting to me is if you go back and watch their 2 games last year against the Cardinals, like, they went with a very run-heavy approach. They had like 34 and 28 rush attempts from their running backs alone in the 2 games last year. And they were like middle of the pack and I think, run rate in those games. But they mostly dominated in the trenches, which I don't know if they're going to be able to do this year, but they might try. I'm just like interested to see that kind of like balance of like, do they try and just run Kyron Williams and maybe some more Blake Corum in this spot here? Or do they just like do what they did against the Lions, which is, basically have the short passing game be an extension of their running game. But like the Cardinals defensive line is so bad that like, maybe they get away with it. You know what I mean? Like this is one of those things where against the Lions, no shot you're doing that against like Aiden Hutchinson and like, some of the other defensive linemen there. But in this game, maybe. So I don't know. I'm on the Rams here. I think that's definitely an interesting point. My last point I want to make on this Cardinals team, Marvin Harrison Jr. did not look good. It was not a good start. He looked slow. He wasn't getting open.
Don't put too much out there that can get clipped, because I don't think you're going to want to have much out there to run back later, because he's going to be fine.
Asterisk. Okay. In week 1, right. He looked like absolute trash. Okay. And I'm fine saying that because he did. Is it going to be predicted in the future? I don't know, but he didn't look good. That's all I got to say. He did not look good in week 1.
I'll just throw in there, like Cleve TA puts out an NFL preview, and he liked Marvin Harrison Jr., I think plus 750 for offensive rookie of the year. And usually when he puts something out, man, that stuff moves. It moves. This one didn't.
All right.
So I'm not. I
think the market knows there's a little bit of Cardinals bias there, a little bit too, right? There's a little bit of Cardinals bias.
But shouldn't there be a little bit of a Cardinals bump just because? Except for Trey McBride, like what else are they putting out there in terms of pass catching talent, right?
Yeah.
So I think that was part of the argument.
Yeah.
Plus 800 if we want to buy low now. I'm looking at it right now. Our offensive rookie of the year. Some Caleb Williams plus 165 still. Jaden Daniels 3-1.
Wait, plus 165?
Yeah.
After last week?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that where it was?
How do I bet no? What's up?
Is that where it was last week? Was he 165 last week?
It was like 135 or something like that. I think it was like
Okay.
I think peaked at 125 in the preseason. Maybe even 115. Now down to 165, which is still seems so high after what we saw last week, because that was not great either.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ed wants to know based off of that reaction. He wants a Caleb no.
I mean, there's so many markets I would like a no on, right?
Yeah.
I was going to say Circa is like the only place that consistently posts no that you can bet, anything worth $1. So maybe they have no's on those markets, but they usually don't do a ton of like in-season stuff like all the time, like anything too crazy. But I don't know, maybe we can hit up Jeff Benson and see if he'll throw us a bone.
Yeah, that'd be.
Jeff will do whatever you want, man.
Yeah.
Jeff's the best.
Yeah, he's the man of the people, At least that's what it seems like on Twitter. I actually haven't met him in real life, but heard he's a good guy.
Jeff's great. I've met him in person once, just very briefly at the Circa, and we go back and forth on the social. And I went out to Vegas with some friends, and I was like, "Hey, is there anything you can do for us? We want to watch some football." He's like, "Oh yeah, here you go. Here's I don't know, 10 seats in the Circa Sportsbook on NFL playoff weekend." That was a notable day because that was the Jacksonville Chargers playoff game.
Oh.
So this was like 2 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And this was the game where the Chargers were up huge, right?
27 points or something like that. Yeah.
Yep. And we're sitting there in the Circa Sportsbook, and there's a guy in his Chargers jersey. He comes in, and he's like clearly alone, right? There's not another soul that he's talking to, right? And I'm like, okay, fine, cool. And then obviously things go against his team in Jacksonville. I think they line up to kick a field goal at the end, right, to win the game.
Yeah, sounds right.
Point or whatever it was, and he's just sitting there all alone, like with two fingers crossed up in the air. And it was one of the saddest things I've ever seen, man. I felt bad for that dude. But Jeff Benson's the man. So
Point of the story.
Because that experience doesn't happen without his kindness.
Yeah, it's told. Chargers fan friend in my life, my buddy Jeff Feinberg. Feinberg from Twitter, in the golf space. Definitely stole years off of his life. I think he's still not really recovered. And I think a Chargers fan, you start to get a little bit of scars, and they start to callous a little bit. But I think that's still a very fresh wound for Chargers fans. Good thing there's not many of them. So
right, you can just tell them that for Michigan fans, it only took Harbaugh like 9 years to get him to the top. So short wait, right?
Short wait. It's already started. So, all right, let's buzz around. A couple other things that I want to get your thought, Ed, on. This is some interesting market movement here in the Colts and Packers. About 7.5, 8-point adjustment. I'd love to know where you're at, because this in the look ahead line was Packers minus 4.5. Obviously, Jordan Love's late game heroics ended with a sprained knee, whatever, MCL, wherever we're at. Going to be multiple weeks, it seems like, minimally. So probably getting Malik Willis, which is very interesting because they proactively searched out Malik Willis and traded for him towards the tail end of the season to say, hey, we want you to be our backup quarterback here. And now we are basically painted 3 across the board. Colts -3, totals 40.5, 41 out there. What do you think about this one? What do you think about the movement?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know about the movement. Should the Colts be a 3-point favorite? What I do know is that my preseason Wisdom of Crowds model, the one that I've been talking about, would have made the Packers 6.5-point favorites in this game at home. And it is on the Packers for having this quarterback room behind Jordan Love that contains not only Malik Willis, but Sean Clifford, right? I mean, they're lucky that Love didn't go down last year. And we saw more of this kid Clifford that couldn't even get it done at Penn State. And then you bring in another guy who, so he was with Tennessee, and he actually came in for Ryan Tannehill in a game in London against Baltimore last year. Had one nice play on a screen, and they got, they were down 2 scores, and they had a 3rd and goal from the 20. And instead of giving Malik Willis another chance to score a touchdown, Mike Vrabel decided to kick a field goal on 3rd and goal. I think that's all you need to know about Malik Willis. Like, I mean, he's there's nothing. I don't know. I don't know how you're. I mean, look, the Packers are a really good, well-run organization in general, but I just do not know how you end up with that quarterback room. Like, this is on them. You can easily go out and get a veteran that could win you some games right now, Tyrod Taylor or whoever. I mean, you know, there's a lot of guys that you can get. Like, you know. I mean, what you think Packers fans would like a Mason Rudolph right now, right? A Kenny Pickett?
Yeah. Jimmy Garoppolo is out there to be picked up. I mean, you'd feel better about Garoppolo, right? At least it's, you know, he's won football games, won the Super Bowl. Like, you have some, like, there's a pulse there. Whereas, like, look, no offense to Malik and his family, won't be the first. It's not the first, will not be the last, like, exciting young guy who played really well in college and then just had absolutely zero shot in the NFL. And that's just life. That's just how it is. You know, sometimes your best isn't good enough. And his best was good enough at Liberty, but not for the NFL, Connor. Colts -3 on the road here. It's been a game that a lot of people have been talking about because it seems just obviously a massive move through key numbers.
Yeah, and I think that's why the number's at 3 here, because, like, I mean, we're talking about a move that's like 7, 8, 9 points from like look ahead / what most people made it. And people are like, how is it possible to make a move that big, right? Like, it's, you know, feels impossible for a quarterback to be like that big of a downgrade. But at the same time, we have Malik Willis starting and playing 100% of the snaps in 3 games in his career, 99, 80, and 55 passing yards, while completing 60%, 30%, 60% of his passes. I mean, just like, it is hard to overstate how bad of a quarterback Malik Willis is in the NFL. And so you're putting him in a Packers system again, which should probably be able to run the ball well, but like, how well is he even, I don't know, versed in the Packers system? Like, is he a good fit for them executing even basic things? Like, I just have a really, really hard time getting here with Malik Willis. I think Colts -3 is still in play. I don't know. Like, I get it that it's, again, for most people who are like handicapping sides and totals professionally, I get that it's probably a very difficult number to take given where we started and the overall roster makeups. But then you have just a Colts surging Colts offense against the Packers defense that I think is fine. But now we saw last week, the Eagles turned the ball over 3 times and still scored 31 points. Like, is this a good defense? I don't know. You know, like, and now you have a Colts offense that's surging. Like, if the Colts score 28 points, I don't know how the Packers score like 14. You know, like, that's like their only shot of covering is like a 17-14 game, in my opinion. So I have a really tough time playing the Packers. I'm going to be on the Colts. I bet a little bit already. I jokingly tweeted out like the maximum alt on the Colts at 19.5, minus 19.5 when the Malik Willis news came out. I did bet that just for fun, obviously, just like, you know, just to have some skin in the game on what I tweet. But yeah, I have a really tough time sticking with the Packers here. And I would love to just, like, if anyone is listening or you hear anyone that's like betting the Packers at +3 or 3.5 even, I would just like love to hear the reasoning besides like number is just like the biggest move I've ever seen on a side, basically based on a quarterback downgrade.
Yeah, if you're not originating numbers, it's probably a little bit easier to divorce yourself from where it is. Like, it messes with the inputs so much probably to make it, you know, adjustments and all those different things. And it doesn't equate to that type of movement. But again, just the matchup based, analysis, it feels like it's fine. I mean, I think Colts -3 +100, -102 in some spots. It feels pretty interesting to me. And again, I also am willing to, and it will continue to carry water for Anthony Richardson because I think he's got some upside. And I think the same thing for Shane Steichen. It's also very much tied to Shane Steichen, and I think he'll continue to be a talent maximizer. So that would be the case, I think, for Green Bay, is that, look, Matt LaFleur is actually really good, and we'll find a way to scheme something up that makes sense for Willis. That's basically, and I don't necessarily even believe that, but that would be your only like bull case for the Packers, is that you like absolutely believe in LaFleur. So all right, touch briefly on the Thursday night football before we wrap, unless there's something else that you want to highlight, Connor. Is there anything in the game on the board, side total, matchup base that you want to touch on?
No, I think we keep rolling. Ed, you got anything before we touch on Thursday night?
No, I mean, I will say, like, I like the Packers receiving core. Like, it's young.
Yep.
They're good.
Sure.
and there's some data that Matt LaFleur schemes guys open out there that the Packers people will tell you about. Not that I distrust them, but they'll tell you about. There's data to suggest how good Matt LaFleur schemes are. And I don't know, like, I mean, personally for me, and maybe I'm just being a little too quantitative about it. Like I'm not betting this side. Maybe I should, because I do like Anthony Richardson, but it's just one of these things. It's hard for me to put a database number on this game, right? I mean, on my side, I was just like, look, 7 should be the maximum adjustment. Let's go with that.
That Anthony Richardson touchdown pass, guys. Oh man, he didn't even step into it. He was stepping sideways. I mean, just bonkers. I mean, obviously that's just, that's a highlight reel throw. You're going to be able to move the chains, intermediate throws and stuff like that. But man, to be able to the athleticism and arm strength to do that while taking one absolutely on the chin was definitely some softcore football porn for sure. It's fantastic stuff.
Last thing I want to add to, what do you think that they post, assuming Malik Willis starts, what do you think that his over-under passing yards was? For reference, in Tennessee, the last time he started, it was 152 and got bet down to like 144, something like that, which is, that's the lowest that I can remember ever, like for any starting quarterback in the NFL, since I've been betting props, which is, I guess, not that long in the holistic thing, but, obviously for a while, so.
Well, it won't matter yet, but the Colts lost Juju Brents for the season at corner, which is a problem for them considering that cornerback room was already pretty thin. They really needed him to be like the alpha on the outside this season. Now he's lost for the season. So I don't know that Malik Willis is the guy to take advantage of that, but I do think it ends up being problematic for the Colts moving forward. But yeah, I mean, you said right, you listed off the previous box scores. He hasn't topped 100 in any game, correct?
No, nope. 99, 80, and 55 passing yards.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely going to open above 100. So
it'll probably be like 150 again. I mean, there's like what Ed said, there's some confidence that maybe the Packers can scheme him gimmies. I mean, it's possible. I mean, I don't know. I just have a tough time with it. It's something I'm probably not going to bet, even though I love betting the bad quarterback unders.
Yeah. I take completions under because you take yourself out of any yak that could kill you. I mean, I know you're still going to take yards under, but I think completions under is probably the better look. But yeah, well, I'm sure you've been refreshing the screen all day, waiting for that to pop just in case.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. All right, Thursday Night Football, good one. Bills on the road in Miami. This is Miami 2.5. Total 48.5, 49. These are early season games in Miami are a little tricky. At least it's in nighttime because obviously the design of the stadium where that sun beats down on you on the visitor sideline is mitigated a little bit here because you'll be playing on the East Coast in the dark. But Josh Allen, dinged up hands, seems like he's going to be okay. Injury report on the Miami side is not great, but these games have definitely been interesting over the last couple of years. What are your thoughts on Bills Dolphins?
This was the second spread that didn't make sense to me this week. I have the Bills favored on the road. And again, we talked about how maybe Arizona got a little bit of a bump from what happened last week. And that's why we're seeing the number that we're seeing in the Rams at Arizona. I think maybe the markets have downgraded on Buffalo a little bit because of that game. And I've already kind of made the case that I think that's not the right thing to do. I think Buffalo is good, and I think they are a Super Bowl contender. Teron Johnson, the cornerback, is out. He will not play in this game, so that obviously is not good. And they still have two pretty strong corners in Benford and Douglas, but it looks like they're going to a second-year guy who hasn't played much in the slot.
Cam Lewis should be in the slot, yeah.
And look, Miami's offense is going to be great. It's a challenge to see what is going to happen on that side of the ball. But look, Miami's defense, I still have a lot of questions about. And this is a team that is still really dealing with kind of the aftermath of some injuries. So Jalen Phillips played last week, but he's actually listed as questionable. He blew out his Achilles last year, and now he's questionable because of his Achilles. So that doesn't seem particularly good. Still no Bradley Chubb. And Jalen Ramsey has been a great cornerback in this league. He came back halfway through the season last year and had a very respectable PFF grade of 65 when he came back. That's good. So average is about 60. And, you would love to have a team with guys having 65. For Jalen Ramsey, that was a career low. So, what are they getting on that side of the ball? And, when the preseason wisdom of crowds model kind of, chewed through everything, Miami ended up 12th. So great offense, but enough questions about that defense that they're not putting them, it's a borderline playoff team for the model. I just don't think I can get off of that right now. I think the Bills should be favored. I sent this out to members a little bit earlier today. I do like Bills plus 2.5. Is that still available? Or is it 2.5?
Yep.
Yeah. Across the board, minus 110s out there too. So you're absolutely fine. Yeah. I mean, Connor, we touched on this a little bit in our AFC preview too. Like Miami spent along the offensive line. So I think the thought process is that it's a much improved offensive line. I think they just spent along the offensive line. Like Robert Hunt, they gave him money like he's an elite guard. He's not an elite guard. But again, last week, Miami had the lowest yards created before contact in the league. And they have some dynamic running backs that do a pretty damn good job at avoiding contact before they get the defenders in them. And that's kind of the strength of the defensive line for the Bills as well. Up front Greg Rousseau played his brains out last week. It was awesome. 3 sacks. Ed Oliver is the man. I think you're going to see some good steps there. The Teron Johnson thing in the slot is a problem, but feeling like a nice little Wong teaser here with the Bills and Rams. Some of the games that those are kind of the best in the spot too. 1.5 on the Rams. We can take that out to 7.5, and we can get the Bills out to 8.5 here too. Unless you have a better thought on the Dolphins. I know you would like to, part of the 2 and on group.
I am part of the 2 and on group, but it's my 2 and on membership I think is kind of running out here because
expired.
Yeah, it's recently expired. I'm up for renewal. We'll see if I renew my card here as the season develops. No, but it's like I think in this game specifically, I've been thinking about this a lot. Raheem Mostert announced out. Devin Achane limited participant. I think that we're going to see a lot of Achane in the receiving game. I don't think we're going to see him as like the primary early down runner. I think Jeff Wilson is going to start. But I think that they kind of like we saw from the Rams in a sense, like we're going to see a lot of short passes and quicker passes in this game instead of a running game. And so how that develops and how this plays in the game, I'm not entirely sure. That's just like kind of how my thought process is forming of like anticipating how they're going to game plan without, a guy like Raheem Mostert, who's capable of a little bit more, I don't know, between the tackles running, if they want to do that, which again, they don't really do that a ton as is, but like he's at least capable of withstanding that. Whereas I don't think that they're going to run Achane right up the middle a bunch. So I don't know. I think that probably, plus 2.5 makes a lot of sense here. I think that again, this Bills offense is still figuring a lot of stuff out about itself. I mean, Mac Hollins is like a near full-time player. Keon Coleman played way better than I think most people anticipated. Khalil Shakir, is what Khalil Shakir is, just kind of like a slot guy who's able to get open occasionally on the outside as well. And then Curtis Samuel played like 9 snaps last week, who's recovering from a turf toe injury, but I don't think he plays much on a short week, like ramp up. I think the week after this, he'll probably have a bigger role. But how does that all fit in? I think they're still trying to kind of figure that whole thing out here without Josh Allen having a reliable guy on a, play-to-play basis, whereas Dalton Kincaid could be that guy, but he was like double, triple covered a lot last week. And I think that was obviously part of the game plan because he, again, is their pretty much only reliable, pass catcher, I would say, in the short to intermediate at this point. So I think I would play the Bills. It's not something I love, but I think it's probably the right side.
I wrote up the look aheads here last week. Total was 51.5, which felt really high. And that's the market's obviously corrected a little bit. It still feels a little high, especially if the Bills can run the football or depending on this quick short passing game, that still feels a little high, though it's obviously hard to do when you've lost 2.5 points based off of where you were last week. But I think Ed's talked me into a nice little long teaser here that I feel pretty
good. I love that idea when you mentioned it. I was like that. Those are like the 2 games I like the most this week.
And they're the ones that kind of fit the best too on the spot. I mean, obviously we're dealing with high totals, so that's not great, like in terms of where you want to be with long teasers, but feeling like those are probably flipped even based on your numbers. We'll probably have the wrong team favored. Feel a little bit better about it.
I like that as well. I'll be playing that just for, for the brand, obviously. But then I got to mention here, I was looking into it more. Giants Commanders. I mean, this is like, a toilet bowl right now, but I'm gonna be betting the Giants money line here, which sounds ridiculous, but we talked about it in the preseason about this Commanders team, about how we're like, hey, like, unless Jaden Daniels is RG3, like Cliff Kingsbury has been a terrible coach for like 6 years. Even at USC, he was bad. And then Dan Quinn, weren't sure was a good coach. Their offensive line sucks. They're, like the scheme bad team. I didn't really like all that much either. And again, I know the Giants are terrible, but I want to buy them more than I want to buy the Commanders here. So I'm going to be playing them a little bit here just because I want to keep fading the Commanders. And I don't think might be the last time that the Commanders are favored all season, to be honest, in this spot.
Just take Malik Neighbors' ladders. Just call it a day.
Just all of it, man. I mean, it's just all of it. It's I just want to be able to tweet out like how much of a donkey Cliff Kingsbury is. Because I mean, that was just like, it's just all the same, and it's now like worse players. Like, I mean, it's all the same as it was in Arizona with like 7 or 8 screens, a bunch of scrambles. Like, then he misses the one deep shot to McLaurin. Like, it's really bad.
The only problem is Dan Quinn. It's not quite Brian Flores from a schematic standpoint.
Yeah.
Flores is kind of his own dude, but Danny Jones is going to get a lot of man looks. He's going to get a lot of second level pressure, and that is not gone very well for Daniel Jones. Did not go well last week. Second level pressure got to him a ton. That'd be my only concern, but it's very easy to find concerns on the Commander side as well. So, Ed, what's your number on Giants Commanders?
My number is, gosh, I got Washington by about 3. I do know that a prominent NFL service like the Giants here.
Okay. There you go, Connor.
There you go, Connor.
Crowd, buddy.
I'm with the Sharps. Let's go.
You're definitely with the Sharps.
All right. That wraps it up. Ed, I just could not appreciate it more. Again, folks need to go over to thepowerrank.com, find Ed on Twitter at thepowerrank. And again, don't forget to go over to Spotify or go over to the site. It was thepowerrank.us, you said, Ed?
Yeah, that's a URL that'll take you to the site, the page on the site.
Go to the site, find that podcast, get a little bit of intro to, learn about his process a little bit. 60-minute guide to the 2024 football season. Appreciate it very much. Again, come back. Move the Line will be again on Friday. Prop drop show. Sounds like Connor might have some Malik Neighbors props in there, some other stuff to go on. I'll be back at 3 p.m. Eastern. Again, 4for4 YouTube channel. Move the Line wherever you find podcasts. For Connor and Ed, I'm Ryan. We'll see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.